Jeffrey Rosen is the president and CEO of the National Constitution Center. He's also a professor at George Washington University Law School. Jeffrey, great to have you on the show. Welcome. Let me start off with that little, with that comment that we heard in that interview there from the president, where he says he doesn't know whether he needs to uphold the Constitution. This was, of course, as we play there, just 3 months or so since, of course, he swore an oath to do so. Do you buy his comments that he doesn't know, or is this just willful ignorance, you think?
Well, there's no question that the president's most serious and sacred oath is to uphold the Constitution of the United States. So there's no question that he has to uphold it. If President Trump was saying he doesn't know he has to uphold the Constitution, it would indeed be a grave dereliction of that oath. He might have been read to say that he doesn't know whether the Supreme Court's interpretation of the Constitution is correct, and he has the right to interpret the Constitution differently than the Supreme Court. And that's a claim that presidents ever since Thomas Jefferson have made, but it really wasn't clear from the context of that interview exactly what President Trump was saying. And it certainly is worth emphasizing that the president must uphold the Constitution of the United States. That is what he swears to do when he takes the oath of office.
Yeah, I suppose the other question is, how else would you interpret it? How else is he going to interpret it? It's very clear, the Constitution, is it not?
Well, not about all of the issues that are before the Supreme Court, ranging from whether or not the president can fire the heads of independent agencies, to whether the tariffs are constitutional, to all of these really serious issues involving immigration. And he seemed to be talking about immigration there, and there, of course, there's a very serious dispute. Will the president obey an unambiguous order of the U.S. Supreme Court? The Supreme Court just a few weeks ago ordered the president to facilitate the release of Mr. Garcia, who's being held in El Salvador. It's not clear whether or not the administration is complying. He's never come out and say, I will defy the Supreme Court. That would be a constitutional crisis, because no president in American history has defied an unambiguous order of the U.S. Supreme Court. But in that interview, as in President Trump's other comments, he hasn't said that. And what exactly he meant by that, we'll see. I've got to talk to the lawyers. And it was interesting that he did follow that up by saying, if the Supreme Court speaks, I'll obey that. So he continues to reassert his willingness to obey the court at the same time as he's drawing these legalistic distinctions and appearing to say that he can interpret the Constitution differently.
Yeah, I kind of get mixed messages on this topic, and in particular on the Kilmar Abrego Garcia, of course, the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, which the Supreme Court was asking to facilitate the return, all right? Are we on the way? Are you concerned at all, Jeffrey, that we're on the way of the constitutional crisis, or are we already there, in your view, given all the challenges this administration is facing in the courts, as our reporter was telling us in the last 10 minutes or so?
I do draw a high bar for a constitutional crisis. I think ignoring an unambiguous order of the Supreme Court would absolutely be a constitutional crisis, because no president has done that. Now, President Trump has not obeyed an unambiguous order, and he's not said that he will. But what's concerning about this interview and many other comments of the president is he comes up to the brink of saying, well, maybe I don't have to listen to the courts, and in very much attacking lower court judges and calling for their impeachment and so forth. He's creating an atmosphere in which it's not clear whether or not he'll obey when push comes to shove. What this latest comment was interesting in suggesting that all persons in the United States are not entitled to due process. There, the Constitution also is unambiguous. It says no person shall be deprived of due process of due process of the law. And the Supreme Court has interpreted that to mean all persons, citizens and non-citizens alike. So that's a question about which there's no room for debate, and the president's unwillingness to concede that is troubling.
And in that same interview with NBC, he said he wasn't, quote, looking at running for a third term in 2028, as if it's a personal choice whether he obeys the Constitution. How do you interpret his words? And do you worry that his words and his actions could potentially, if he doesn't stick to the rule of law and to what the Constitution says, could be turning the country towards authoritarianism?
Well, on the third term, the Constitution is pretty unambiguous. It says that you can't be elected twice to the presidency. There's a complicated scenario in which someone could run as vice president after having served for 2 terms, get elected vice president, have the elected president resign and take over. And it's arguable that that's a loophole that the framers didn't anticipate. But we're really not talking about something like that. And in any event, President Trump then walked back that comment about I decide and said, J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio would be a good successor. All of these are areas not of openly breaking the law, but of breaking norms and of always sort of coming up to the edge of appearing to say that he can thwart clear text or Supreme Court precedents and then walking it back. There's an atmosphere of uncertainty, which could indeed create a lack of respect for the rule of law in the United States.
You must be having quite fascinating discussions in your law school, Jeffrey, with all these cases ongoing. I would love to be a little fly on the wall to see the discussions being had. What a moment. Jeffrey, appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.